The early birds. Good work. Are we getting a oh? See? Okay. Good work, good work. שבוע טוב. לא ש... Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Shavuot Tov, how are you?
שבוע טוב, ברני. ברוך השם.
Okay. We're coming to the conclusion, the end, huh? He already, Ernie already says he's ready to move on to Ezra and Nehemiah.
Okay.
As the next step when we finish. So you're well, I don't know if he's told you that yet, but that's the plan.
We're going to graduate.
We have to make a siyum. I see you already wearing your shleikis already. The ceremony.
After Shabbos, I have to
All right.
keep my pants on.
Hi, Mario. Good luck.
Hello, good luck.
The kitchen smells really bad. What's wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
The fridge is bad? It smells really bad then.
Okay.
You all said it smelled really bad.
Ziggy.
Hello, Shavuot Tov.
Hello.
Hello. Hey.
Hello. Tov, everybody.
Hello.
Mazel tov, Tzvi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Simchas by everybody.
Amen.
What's the mazel tov?
My grandson had a oifruf today.
Oh,
Oh,
wonderful.
mazel tov.
Oh, I said mazel tov in your suspenders. That's what I meant.
That's also a new one.
What Tov?
Mekashechianu.
You're jealous.
True.
Make a broccoli's famous question.
What's that?
No, nothing. I just go.
Who's selling diamonds?
Of everybody.
Shavuot
Hey,
Tov.
how are you feeling?
Baruch Hashem. Good.
Is this the last?
Yeah, I think you're on, I think what were your Yud Bays
Mario.
or Yud Gimel?
Mario always knows.
I think we finished 9:14, but I don't know.
Oh, we did up to 14?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we talked about that Haman's 10 sons were hung, and they also killed 500 men in Shushan along with these. Esther in Pasuk Yud Gimel had requested from Achashverosh that the Jews, because remember, everywhere else it was on the 13th of Adar that they did battle, and then they rested on the 14th, which became the holiday of Purim. But Esther requested from the king that they would get another day on the 14th of Adar. That's when they hung Haman's sons. And obviously the king is going along with it, so it shows that he's supporting them. And Esther now wants to extend to another day. And by showing how powerful they are in Shushan, it would frighten all the enemies of the Jews everywhere else. So Pasuk Yud Gimel, let's just read it. Vatomer Esther Melech Tovin Asenka Machar Shushan. That Esther requests from the king that they be given another day on the 14th. And on that day is when they would hung. Remember, Haman was hung already 11 months ago, and his body is still on the gallows there.
It was the second day of Pesach.
Exactly.
In Nisan. Yeah.
That's 11 months ago. Haman's body is still there, hung then. Now, the day that the Aseres Bnei Haman we're told, is going to be the 14th of Adar. Because remember, the battle takes place 11 months later, on the 13th of Adar everywhere else, and on the 14th of Adar in Shushan. By hanging them, everyone would be afraid. By the way, in Pasuk Yud Beis, when it says Vayomer HaMelech L'Esther HaMalka, which we learned, a Malach, he was angry, and the Malach shut Achashverosh up quickly, and went along with whatever Esther wanted. Now you notice, I don't know if we said it last week, that you see Achashverosh is going along with everything that Esther's requesting. So many Meforshim ask, why didn't Esther at that time ask? Because remember, the Binyan Beis Hamikdash had been stopped, partly by Aseres Bnei Haman, right? They had been given permission to go up to Yerushalayim under Koresh, who was before Achashverosh, but then they stopped the building. We're going to learn, God willing, next week in Ezra, the beginning of Ezra, how the building restarted. But the question is, if Esther sees that Achashverosh is giving in to everything going along, why didn't she ask at that time that he should give permission to continue the binyan of Beis Hamikdash?
I just wonder, what is ve'abed mean? Argu ve'abed.
So abed is to destroy.
So argu, they killed them. What do you mean destroy?
You're talking about in
Yud Beis.
which pasuk?
Yud Beis.
Yud Beis. Okay. Vayomer HaMelech L'Esther HaMalka, B'Shushana B'Ra Hargu HaYudim ve'Abed, Chamesh Meos Ish.
What is ve'abed?
So it's slain and annihilated, killed and like completely exterminated. We had somewhere else where by Haman, the Hereg Va'abed was also a spiritual destruction, but here it's not. It's them a complete extermination. L'chora, a double language like that. Can I have that?
This one?
Yes.
Should I get that one too?
No. I don't see really anybody that makes a comment. It's a good kasha, but I don't see anybody that really speaks about any limud that we have by the double lashon there.
It's interesting that here they say that כאילו היה מצטער על הדבר. That Achashverosh was
That's from the Gemara. Vayomer Melech l'Esther Malka. Omer v'vo melamit sheba malach ustarav al piv. That he wasn't happy when he was angry because he saw so much destruction. Right? Rashi says melamit sheba malach sharei hitzkel l'daber b'loshen kas. V'sofa Omer mash lo sefa. But he didn't see ad chatzei malchus. Right? Before, chatzei malchus meant building the Beis Hamikdash. Here he didn't say that. It was the Bnei Haman that was preventing the binyan Beis Hamikdash. Seder Olam says that it was the sons of Haman that were contributing to that. The Daryavish ben Achashverosh, they started rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash in the second year of Achashverosh, and Esther had a son, Daryavish, and the Darius the second, and they started rebuilding in the second year. Now, the question is, like I was going to ask, why didn't Esther ask at that time? Which is before they started rebuilding. We've learned many times that destroying Amalek is one of the conditions that you need before you build the Beis Hamikdash. Because it says, Ki yad al kes ka, milchama Hashem b'Amalek. The Kisei Hashem is not complete until there's Mechias Amalek. So the Kisei Hashem is the Beis Hamikdash. You can't have the Beis Hamikdash until there's an element of Mechias Amalek. That's why the Rambam lists 3 mitzvahs that Bnei Yisrael were mitzvah when they entered Eretz Yisrael. Minui Melech, Mechias Amalek, Ubinyan Beis Hamikdash. And in that order. So eventually Shmuel, they were Misman David, then, well, at least initially Shaul, he was commanded to wipe out Amalek. He didn't finish it. David finished it. And then David's son, Shlomo, built the Beis Hamikdash. But Esther, they weren't finished with Mechias Amalek. That's why the Pasuk says, V'yiniach lechem mikol aveichem. V'haya makom asher yivchar Hashem. First, you got to get rid of the oivim. Then you build the Beis Hashem. So the Hachri Zara Shel Amalek has to go first. And since there were a lot of Amalekim in Shushan, this was not the time for Esther to ask for binyan Beis Hamikdash. There were more enemies in Shushan than anywhere else, because that's what Haman was. Remember, the Chassam Sofer says Haman had used astrology to choose Adar as the day to destroy the Jewish people because he saw that Moshe died in Adar. What he didn't know was that Moshe was born in Adar. Right, so he thought it was going to be bad for Israel, but it was just the opposite. Rav Yonasan Eibeshit says people didn't really recognize the Nes and the change in Teva that HaKadosh Baruch Hu engineered now by Nes Purim. People said, no, now that Achashverosh found out that Esther was Jewish, so he regretted, and that's why the Jewish people weren't going to be killed. So Esther needed a double, that's why she asks again for Yudalit, which is not B'das HaMelech. The Melech doesn't want anything to do that. So that shows the enormity of the Nes. That because the Nes was because Klal Yisrael did tshuva. We said because when Haman removed the ring, it led to more tshuva than Memches Nevi'im. Weiter. Okay, Pasuk Yudalit. Vayamar Melech le'asos came. Achashverosh agreed. V'tinasa in Bershu Shushan v'saseres Pnei Talu. He gave a decree that they shouldn't be afraid, and they hung the Haman's sons. Haman's wife Zeresh, the Targum says, fled, was not killed, even though she was part of the plan to kill Mordechai. And the Targum says that they were hung on the same gallows as Haman, in order of how old they were. Parjandasa was hung first. Hung right below Haman. They were half an amma each one, away from each other. And the Meforshim says Haman hung from Tet Zayin Nisan until Yudalad Adar, when his 10 sons were hung with him. They were all hanging there by themselves. Now, we said that Haman had 70 sons. The other sons became poor and had to be choizer al psachim, knocking on the door for tzedakah. That was part of how the word of the nace spread, because they heard that their brothers were hung, and Mordechai is now the prime minister. Because in going around, they would be asked, well, what are you doing here? And that was one of the methods that the information about the nace spread. Pasuk Tezvav. Vayikalu Ayudim Asher b'Shushan. So the Jewish people gathered in Shushan Gam B'Yom Arbasar l'Chodesh Adar on the 14th day. Vayargu b'Shushan 300 ish. 300 men were killed. Uvaviza lo shluchos yadam. Again, they did not take any spoils. So we said the day before they killed 500 in Shushan, and the next day they only killed 300.
What's important?
So Tzvi, they killed less on the second day because most of the people were hiding. The first day they came out, they were able to kill 500. The second day was only 300 because those 300, even though so many people were killed, they were brazen enough to come out. They were killed as well. Yes, Tzvi.
But after what happened to Shaul, that he didn't take the spoil, so here that they say, "Bebiza lo shalchu yadam," they say it's a negative.
No, Shaul did take the spoils. This we said it last week, that this was a tshuva. Shaul, if you remember, when they came back, Shmuel comes to visit Shaul and he says, "Ma kol atzon be'oznai." Well, what are the sheep? So Klal Yisrael had taken biza at that time. They were not supposed to.
I see.
They were not supposed to. So and here in the decree that Mordechai sent Tzvi, they were told that they were allowed to take biza in the decree. But here they held themselves back. That we explained last week. It's one of the reasons why we do Matonas Levyonim. Because who suffered most by not taking biza? The Aniyim. And the Aniyim still held back. They didn't take biza, and that's why we pay them back every year on Purim.
So they should take the visa.
They were allowed to. There was not an Aveira to do it. Because remember, we explained that it was not Haman's anymore. Remember, Haman became an Eved, and it belonged to Achashverosh. It didn't belong to Haman at some point. That we went through a whole analysis why there was no Aveira this time to take Shlal. Pasuk Tezayim. Ushar Yudim Asher B'Nosa Melech Nikalu V'Amod Nafsham. It says that the Jews in the other 127 Medinos had gathered, had defended themselves. V'Noach Me'oiveim, and they had gained relief in Arog B'Soneim and killed in their enemies. Chamisha V'Shivim Aleph. 75,000. They're also, throughout the Medinos of Achashverosh, they did not take booty. But they did not do battle for 2 days. They only did battle 1 day. The second day, Yud Daled Adar, for them became a holiday. That because they were Noach me'oiveyim. And they celebrated the miracle on that day. On the 14th is when the rest of the Jews celebrated the miracle. The menucha that they had was Yom Yud Daled.
The rest of the Jews. When did they slay the 75,000?
On Yud Gimel Adar,
Mhm.
when they did battle.
I had only question, Ayuden. Where
Yeah.
would they suddenly the Jews have all this weaponry? Because they were so afraid. So suddenly they became, I don't know.
But
Suddenly they were victorious. Where do you think they got all this weaponry from?
they had 11 months to prepare. No, less, because remember, Chaf Beis Sivan. Remember the letters that Mordechai sent out warning them that they're going to be able to stand up and defend themselves. So they had 10 months to prepare. So they got weapons, they prepared.
Yeah. No. Jews could never fight.
Then Yud Zayin, Biyom Shlosha Asar L'Chodesh Adar. They battled on the 13th, the Noach Bar Basar Bo, but they had a rest on the 14th. And therefore, Asa Oso, on that day, the 14th, they made it a Yom Mishte V'Simcha. They had feasting and Simcha. By the way, there was no tzivui at this time. There was no commandment. This is going to come later for the next year. At this time, this was a spontaneous celebration. This mishta is by themselves. There was no tzivui to do a mishta v'simcha. So we said before they had made tshuva. They had reached the madrega like before Matan Torah, where there was no zuama. That's why we said last time, Ilu Kirvanu L'fnei Har Sinai, V'lo Natan Lano Tator Dayenu. It was a special mila that they had, either achdus, or that they were clean of sin. And we have 365 248 mitzvahs saseh and 365 mitzvahs lo saseh. The Ramach, the 248 mitzvahs saseh are connected. We have 248 limbs of our body. The 365 lo sasehs are gidim. So the Torah, in a sense, is like a dugma of the goof of the person. It's the malbush ruchani of the neshama. When the goof and the neshama are pure, so you can understand mitzvahs of the Torah by yourself. Like Avram Avinu, they say, was mekayim kol Torah kula. He was not mitzvah. So Bnei Yisrael, this is like Bnei Yisrael standing before Sinai. They didn't have zuama, and therefore they were able to be masig this concept of a mitzvah. That's why they also didn't take shlal. They weren't mitzuva here not to take it, just the opposite. They were told they were allowed to take it. Each one, they were mechavein not to take shlal. So they were on a high madrega at this point. And it's this pure simcha that year that led to the Mishnah. First, there was simcha, because we're going to see later on in a pasuk, the later pasuk, it says magia simcha v'sason layudim mishte v'yom tov. So there was a first an outbreak, even though it says here mishte v'simcha, The later pasuk defines it was really simcha, and that led them to do mishta. Later on, after they were given a tzivui, it says Yemei mishta v'simcha. That l'doiros, that was based on a tzivui. Didn't come authentically or spontaneously. The Mishnah of Achila V'Shtia, the whole nace began with Achila V'Shtia by Mishnah Achashverosh, when he said to bring Vashti and she didn't come and she was killed, and Esther came, and then the whole Gula came. So that's why we do Mishnah, to remember that the whole thing started with a Mishnah with Achashverosh. And again, this Hamelech ve'Hamon, they sat in a Mishnah, and that's what led Haman being hung. So that's why there's a Mishnah. So Pasuk Yutes, Alkena Yudima Prazim. So now we are explained how the halacha developed. Because the Yudima Prazim, the Prazim these are people, Jews that live in unwalled towns. Hayoshvim Barea Prazot, Osim et Yom Arbasar Lechodesh Adar. That's why those people make on the 14th day Simcha u'Mishte v'Yom Tov. They make a Simcha, a Mishte, a Yom Tov, Mishloch Manot, and sending gifts, Ish L'Re'eyu. You notice it doesn't say anything about Matonis Levyonim here. So the Simcha refers to, we do not make Hespedim on Purim. Mishte, we're not allowed to fast. Yontov normally means no malacha. In the end, they didn't work on that first day. But later on, when Mordechai makes the tzivuim for doiros, he did not institute that. We'll see why. Then they established this custom to send food ready to eat. That's the mishloach manos. And it has to be at least two kinds of food. By the way, we're going to see soon, it doesn't say befeirush all the dinim of Shushan Purim. We're going to see in the later, from this Pasuk, which states specifically the 14th, and we'll see the Pasuk 21, how we assume that it's going to be. But it doesn't say it befeirush like it says here. The way the history went was, the Sanhedrin, remember, Mordechai is a member of the Sanhedrin, they wanted to establish Purim L'Persume Nisa. And this spontaneous celebration took place on the 14th day of Adar, when they rested the day after their battle. And Mordechai declared that that's going to be a yontiv. Shushan had its own miracle, which was on the 14th is when they did battle. And therefore its original celebration was the 15th of Adar. However, Shushan was in the Jewish world, to limit that celebration to Shushan alone, they understood that in the future it might not even be Jewish. The Chachamim said that the 15th Shushan Purim would be celebrated in any city that had a wall around it, which was like Shushan. Shushan had a wall. Now, Eretz Yisrael at that time had no walls. It was all had been destroyed. Yerushalayim didn't have a wall. So right now, when the Jews were in Yerushalayim trying to build the Beis Hamikdash, there was no wall there. So Yerushalayim would be inferior to other walled cities, and Yerushalayim would have to celebrate Purim on the 14th. So the Chachamim went back and said, the din applies to any city that was walled, Mimos Yoshua bin Nun. They would celebrate this Purim on the 15th. Now Yerushalayim was walled at the time of Yoshua bin Nun. Now it's interesting, Shushan was not walled at the time of Yoshua bin Nun, but Shushan was given a special status because that's where the miracle was. So there were many walled cities at the time of Yoshua. But during the course of history, many of them have been destroyed. Even though we have walled cities, we don't know whether those walls are in the same place. The only city in the world that today definitely celebrates Purim on the 15th is Yerushalayim. All the other ancient walled cities, they read the Megillah on the 14th. They read it again on the 15th without a bracha. These cities are Ashdod, Ashkelon, Beersheba, Beit Shan, Gush Kalav, Hebron, Haifa, Tveria, Yafo, Lod, Gaza, Akko, Tzfat, Ramla, and Shechem. So they read their Purim on the 14th. They read it again with a bracha. They read it again on the 15th without a bracha because it's not for sure this issue about when the wall was there and when it wasn't there.
Is that both the night and the daytime reading of the Megillah?
Yes, like Shushan Purim. You mean these cities will read it at night
Four
and in the day
times.
without a bracha. They'll read it 4 times, but the second time without a bracha. I want to read the Gemara Megillah. Hey, Amid Beis Tani Rav Yosef Simcha Mishta v'Yontiv Simcha Melamed Shasurim behesped. No hesped. Mishta Melamed Shasur b'Tainis. You can't fast. Yontov Melamed Shasur b'Sis Malacha. But in the Gemara's Maskana, it says hesped v'Tainis kiblu alayu. They accepted this gzeira of no hesped and no tainis, but Malacha lo kiblu alayu. But the people didn't accept this, the not working. In this first pasuk, it says Simcha Mishta v'Yontiv. Later on, pasuk Chav Beis, it says Lasoso Sam Yemei Mishta v'Simcha. It doesn't say Yontiv. That's Ad Kan Loshna Gemara. So the Gra says Simcha, Mishte, Yontov, Mishlach Manos. 4 things. There are 4 things keneged what Haman wanted to do. Because by Haman it says La Shmid, La Rog, Ula Abeid, Ushlolam Lavos. So a person has 4 things, says the Gra. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Guf. Now, the nefesh naguf is one thing, like the Zohar says. The nefesh is the shutuf of the guf. The hadaladu akinyan, that means your assets. So you need the neshama for mitzvahs. So Haman wanted to get rid of everything. That means lahashmid elu ha-mitzvahs, she'en kineged ha-neshama. Remember, Haman, it says, Lahashmid, Laharog, La'abed, Ushlolam Lavos. So the Gra is learning like this, that Haman wanted Lahashmid, Elo HaMitzvahs, which was next, which connected on Neshama. Laharog, Hu HaRuach HaChiyuni, spiritual. La'abed, Afilu HaGuf HaGufanim in HaOlam. The Abed was the physical destruction. Ushlolam Lavos, Hu HaKinyan. That they shouldn't be in any one place, Klal Yisrael, and they shouldn't have a name anywhere in the world. So now we have a new mitzvah. The reading of the Megillah, the Mishnah, and the Matonis Levyoni, which doesn't come in now, comes in later. Pasuk Chaf. Vayichtov Mordechai Esadrim Ha'ele. This means Mordechai wrote the Megillah exactly as we have it. The Megillah we read, that's written now, Vayichtov Mordechai Esadrim Ha'ele. That's how Rashi learns. He wanted to write this to ensure the annual celebration of Purim. He wanted to make sure that the Jewish people would never forget it. Vayishlach Sfarim el kol haYehudim asher b'chol medinos hamelech Achashverosh hakrovim v'archokim. He paskins now that the Megillah has to be read every year, and that this observance take place on the 14th of Adar in the unwalled cities and on the 15th in the walled cities. In this pasuk, he says that there doesn't have to be Isra Malacha. And these instructions are sent everywhere throughout the world. Achashverosh ruled over the world. 170 Medinos is Mehodu Vad Kush. This comes from the Megillah and Yerushalmi. Rav Yirmiyah b'Shem Rav Shmuel Ma Asru Mordechai ve'Esther Kosvu Igeris v'Sholchu l'Rabbuseinu. Esther and Mordechai wrote a letter to the rabbis. Shekain Amru Lahem Mekablim Atem Aleichem Shnei Yomim Alalu B'Chol Shana. They told the Sanhedrin, we want you to accept that we're establishing a yontif for these 2 days. Amru Lahem Lo Dayenu Atzaros Rabos Aleinu. Not enough all these sorrows. Elishatem Roitzim Losif Aleinu Atzaros Shaloma. You want to add sorrows? Or that we should remember what a tzuris it was? Chazru v'kosfulen igeres shniya. So that's why they had to write a second letter. L'kayim aleim es igeres apurim azos hashenis. We're going to read later on in this parak that they had to write it again. And they responded to the chachamim who were afraid. They'll say, Halohem ksuvim al sefer divrei yamim malchei madei poras. This is already written in the history books. That's why some of the reasons why Hashem's name doesn't appear, because they wrote it exactly the way it was written in the Persian and Median history books. There's another famous Gemara that says, Sholchalem Esther lechachamim, kisvuni ledoiros. Esther wrote a letter to the Chachamim, write my story for generations. It already says 3 times to be maskir Melchemes Amalek. It says in Beshalach Vayavo Amalek. In Parshas Kiseitze it says Zachor Asher Asalach Amalek. And by Shmuel Pokadati Es Asher Asal Amalek. So they told her, it's already written 3 times. Ad Shematzulo Mikra Kosu B'Torah Ksov Zo Zikaron B'Sefer. The Simbos Ne Yoshua. Ksov Zos Mashakosu Kan. So that's the source how the Chachamim used it. They were able to write this Megillah. You see, Rashi says, "Hu Megillah Zos Kamoshehi." When it says Vayichtov Mordechai, it's our Megillah, the way we have it. Pasuk Chafalev. L'kayem aleihem. Part of what Mordechai wrote to them is besides the Megillah, he gave them the instructions to be Makayim liyososim es yom arbo asar l'chodesh adar v'yom chamisha asar bo b'chol shana v'shana. You notice it doesn't give all the details what they're supposed to do on the 15th, but we assume that they're going to do exactly that we do on the 14th. And there's a unification, there's an achdus that all the Jews in the world are going to do the same thing. Olive. And even though this first year they did it on their own, they were makabel, this sivui of Mordechai, that b'chol shana v'shana they would continue it as mitzuvim v'oisim, and they're mechuyev. By the way, the Chassam Sofer in Yoredeya says, Kvias Yom Moed, B'yom Asiyas Nesu Kal V'chomer D'Oraisa. He says, L'fianias Daiti Yom HaPurim V'Chanukah D'Oraisa Hem. Wow. We assume that Chanukah and Purim are mitzvahs midrabanan. The Chassam Sofer says it has a D'Oraisa status. Achmal Asot B'Yamim L'shloch Manos L'adlik Neiros Olaso Zechacher Zeo D'Rabanan. That means the Iker day is really midoraisa. The various mitzvahs that we do, lighting the menorah, sending mishloch monos, those are the rabbanon. But if you don't celebrate, do anything, you're over on the mitzvahs to say doraisa. Listen to this, what the Halila Mordechai says. He says, "B'chol dor v'dor b'mei Purim, tzrichim liot b'nei Yisrael ki'ilu hem hayamim asher nachu b'hem hayudim." We have to, it's like what we say on Pesach. We have to be laharois l'satzmacham. We say in the Haggadah, we view ourselves at the Haggadah as if we went out of the Mitzrayim. He says that on Purim we have to have the same feeling. V'yalek kol echad al atzmo ki'ilu hu nimtza sham b'tzor v'lo nitzol. Ki inyan shenem al yitzis Mitzrayim v'otanu hotzi misham. Chai avadim liros etzatzmo ki'ilu yatzor mitzrayim. We, who live many of us are children of Holocaust survivors, we can put ourselves in that situation. It's mamish amalek, and mamish we were saved from it. So the day that we're supposed to think about that is Purim, because we were in a tzara and we got out of it. I've told you before on Thanksgiving, when my father was alive, he would always recount how he was saved by the American army. He was in Dachau, and he saw a black person driving a truck. He'd never seen a black person before. He saw a Chinese person, and he would recount that every year on Thanksgiving. By the way, I once showed up in 1977 in Antwerp. I was on my way to Israel to do research. I did research between undergraduate at my medical school at Hadassah. And I had an uncle and aunt that lived in Brussels. And their son, Chanoch, lived in Antwerp. And he had gotten married to a woman, Sylvia Rosenblum. Sylvia had a sister who married a guy named Gilbert Weil from Metz. They were the couple from Belgium that was on the Entebbe flight, who said, we're Belgium. Because when they tried to say, put all the Jews here, but they showed their Belgian passport, they were put along together with the Jews. And of course, they were saved. So there was a Hasidic Rebbe in Antwerp named Reb Itzikol. And he told Gilbert that every year on the anniversary, he has to make a Suda. There's a halacha that if there's some nace occurred to you, you have to celebrate it with a Suda, and you have to recount something new about that. And I came a year, it was, remember, July 4th, 1976, and I was on my way. It was July 4th, 1977. They closed off the streets of Antwerp. They gave in a Sefer Torah, and I was there by the Suda Sodah by one of the people who survived Entebbe. That's based on this, about making a yontif and a mishteh, and even on a personal, when you're saved for a nace.
Sorry, I just want to read a short part from the Me'am Lois that talks about feasting and drinking. See, because the three primary drivers of the whole nace of Purim came about. I'll read what it says. Feasting and drinking became an integral part of the Purim celebration, because the most important events in the Purim story occurred during drinking parties. Vashti was killed at such a party. Haman sealed the decree against the Jews at a drinking party with Achashverosh, and Haman's downfall came at Esther's final drinking party.
Very good. Pasuk Chav Beis.
That's why we
So is the last mussar that you're supposed to drink?
The Kiddush Club is still alive.
Yes, we're supposed chayav inish levesume. There's a mitzvah to drink. Pasuk 22 Chav Beis. Kayamim asher nachu b'hem hayudim me'oivehem. celebrating on these days represents the days that the Jewish people rested from the battle with their enemies. V'hachodesh asher nepach lahem miyagon l'simcha, the month where it was switched from agony to simcha, me'eva liyom tov, la'soso sam yimei mishteh v'simcha, that we make party, u'mishloach manos ish re'eyu u'matonos levyonim. So the Mishnah is not commemorating the downfall of our enemies. The Pasuk in Mishlei says, "Binfol oivecha al tismach." Do not rejoice at the downfall of your enemy. It's to commemorate the redemption and salvation of the Jews. That's the point of saying, "Kayamim asher nachu b'am hayudim evoyim." When we have a leap year and you have two Adars, Purim is celebrated in the Adar closest to Nisan. Just as the original Nes of Purim, it occurred during the Adar close to Nisan, and Nisan is the historic month of Jewish redemption. That's why we do Purim the second Adar. Now Mordechai permitted work on Purim because it's forbidden to declare a new yontif that's similar to the Torah. So he came up with something new, mishloach manos. That is unique. We don't do it on any yontif, sending prepared food and also giving gifts to the poor. Just like physical life was threatened and physical life was saved. So besides publicly reciting the story, perpetuating Purim, we enjoy the festivities. We give gifts. We give tzedakah to our poor fellow Jews. That gives us, there's no greater simcha than giving. So matanos levyonim produces simcha. Now, those of you who learn Masechta Megillah, there was a time where they would read the Megillah on Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel of Adar as well, depending on where you lived. And the source for that, Rav Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, is Kayamim asher nachu behem. L'rabois achadasar u'shnei masar, because multiple days. The Meshech Chacham upon side, we didn't do Nes Purim. When Haman was hanged on the 16th day of Purim, 16th day of Nisan, or the day that the people were killed, because that's not a simcha. The simcha occurs when we rest. By the way, you notice this pasuk says hachodesh asher ne'apach lahem. So it says in the Yerushalmi, Tani b'shem Rav Nosson kol hachodesh kosher l'kriyas Megillah. Let's say you're traveling. You're not going to be around. You could read the Megillah any time in Chodesh Adar, because it says hachodesh asher ne'apach lahem yagen l'simcha. However, on Rav Chelbo ad chamisha asar, not beyond 15th, like it says lo yavor. So the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Tafrei Peish Ches Paskins Hamefaresh Bayam. You're going on a long sea voyage. The Hayotze B'Shayar, you're going off on a caravan. The Eina Motze Megillah Lo Lichimo, and you have no Megillah to take with you. Yikre'ena B'Yud Gimel or B'Yud Beis or B'Yud Aleph below bracha. You read it on the 11th or the 12th or the 13th without a bracha. And if you can, Yimefshar Lahamtin Ad Yomim Halalu. If you can't wait till those days, you can read it even on the first of Adar, the second of Adar. Says the Mishnah Brura, afilu mitchilas hachodesh. Tichsiv hachodesh asher napach miyagen l'simcha. By the way, the Alshich gives another explanation for Matonos Levonim. He says, "La'aniyim lo haya chelik b'chatoim shavuram nischav Yisrael shabos adar kliya." Let's remind ourselves, what were the two sins that we learned that the Midrashim say that the Tzara of Haman came. We bowed down to the Tselem of Nebuchadnezzar, and we were Neneme also Suda. We were invited to the Chsud of Achashverosh. Mordechai told us not to go. We went. Ki Nebuchadnezzar lo ichriach es aniyim lishtachvos l'Tselem. Ki lo hayu nechshavim beinav klal. Nebuchadnezzar did not care about the aniyim. He did not make the aniyim bow down. V'gam Achashverosh lo zminam l'sudas ma'itaymo. Achashverosh didn't invite the aniyim. So the lachen kibel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillah saw. It was mainly the tefillah of the aniyim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu received, because they were not involved in the sin. Uveschutam shel aniyim yitzil HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sam Yisrael. Wow. Uvekach zachu sheyitun lehem matanos lavyonim b'Purim. It's for that reason that we give them stock on Purim. And therefore, ein lahem laniyim lizbayesh levakesh stock b'Purim. They should have no shame. Ki b'dinhem notlim. They have a right to get it. Ki b'schutam hayta Yeshua l'Yisrael. It's their schus it's through their schus that we got the whole Yeshua. Says the Ritva, kol hapoishet yad litol noisin lo. She'ein yom zeh midin staka bilvad ele midin simcho manois. It's not a regular din. Normally, by tzedakah, somebody comes on your door, you have a right to ask, what give me your tu'udah, who are you, what are you? You're allowed to establish bonafide. Purim, it has nothing to do with that. Somebody stretches out your hand, you give him. Because it's not totally midin staka, it's midin simcho manois. We do it so everyone should be happy, whether he's Roy, whether he's not Roy. Ein nesina zu midin staka greatesa, el midin simcha. Sharei af la'ashirim yesh lishloach manos. We send mishloach manos even to wealthy people. By the way, the aniyim who is misparnis b'nat staka, they also have to give. They have to give what they gave, what somebody gave them. They have to give to somebody else if somebody asks them. The Mishnah Berurah brings this. Chayev kolod and litain. The af anya misparnes b'nat staka. Even an ani who lives on its staka, das kam achronim the tzarich losis b'mashenastulo. Many achronim hold they have to give too. Even though Behilchos Staka, the Shach says that the Rambam quotes Afilu Ani Misparnis B'nat Staka Chayav Litain Staka La'acher. That's my Rabbi Yesh Lo Parnasoso. That's if he has enough for himself. Means Parnasas Atzmo Kademes L'Chol. You have to provide food for yourself before anybody else. You're not chayav to give tzedakah unless you have your own parnasa.
Ernie, who said that beautiful word about the anim where HaKadosh Baruch Hu was makabel the
Alshich. The Alshich said it. The Alshich.
Oh, it's a great word.
Yeah. We notice in Pasuk Yutes, it didn't say Matanis Levyonim. It only comes in now. So listen to why. Because we said before, Bikshu Lasos Yontif L'Isra Malacha. They were going to make a Yontif, no work, but the people Lo Kiblu Aleim. So when it wrote Yontif, it didn't write Matanis Levyonim. You're not allowed to make a kinyan on Yontif. It's Muktzah. It's money. But now in Pasuk Chav Beis, where they were not mekabil, like we said, this inyan of Yontif, now we can say Matanis Levyonim. That's the Sefer Meizov says this. The Chemdas Yisrael says that in that first year that they were mekabel the Torah from Ratzon, and they did Tshuva Shlema. What does it say in the Torah? Ki lo yevacha evyon. So we have to explain how come in the first pasuk it didn't say anything about Matanis Levyonim, and now 3 psukim later it mentions Matanis Levyonim. So his shot was, we were on such a high madrega that we reached the promise in the Torah, ki lo yevachayav, there was no need for matonas levyonim. We didn't have evyonim. Ach, b'shana shenit yardu mi madregosam. The second year, they dropped from their level. They had aniyim again. They had to give aniyim. And you notice it doesn't say aniyim, it says evyonim. What's the difference between an ani and an evyon? An evyon is somebody who had money, but he lost money, as opposed to someone who never had it. Ani mi karamashma. So it makes sense. There were some people in the next year that they had money, but they lost some. That's why they're called evyonim and not aniyim. Now, the Rav Yonis and Ivshit says that the reason initially they were kavu the yontif but not matonas levyonim, because we know simchas yontif, there's a chiyuv to be mesamech aniyim. Why do we start the seder with halachma anya? You can't have a yontif without making sure that the aniyim have. So there's a din in simchas yontif to take care of the aniyim. Now that they didn't accept the yontif, they needed a new halacha of matonas levyonim. You notice something else. Look in Pasuk Yotes, when it says Mishloach Monois, it has a Vav there. In the Mishloach, it says Mem Shin Lamed Vav Chet. And here in Chav Beis, it says Mishloach Monois without a Vav. So in the original Pasuk, when there was no mitzvah of Matonas Levyonim, it's full. But now, when they have Matonas Levyonim, and what does the Rambam says? We learn this by Tzvika. Mutav laharbois b'matonas levyonim laharbois b'mishloch monos. It's more important to spend more money giving aniyim than mishloch monos. And therefore, lekach ksiv mishloch monos chaser. That's fantastic. I think a fantastic chap there. And by the way, I think we are Makkayim this, because many of us today, we give our Mishloch Manos through the schools, right? Everybody, we have this number of people, and we give, and so it's taka. Because yes, because the school makes profit on that, which is the correct way, according to the Rambam, that really we have to prioritize Matonas Levyonim over Mishloch Manos. So we do our Mishloch Manos in a way that there's a lot of Matonas Levyonim, that Matonas Levyonim, because it goes for tuition, to help tuition for people who don't have. I think that's how we should think about it. Bernie was right. Bernie thought I wasn't going to finish this week. He told me in shul, and he's absolutely correct. Okay. Thought we would go further, but...
Way to go, Bernie.
Huh?
Good job.
Okay, so we might start Sefer Ezra, at least an introduction. Well, maybe not. Maybe we'll have enough material that next week will be, okay, we have to finish next week. We're going to finish next week, God willing.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be 4 for them.
We should make a Suda or something for the big seal.
Well, there's a Suda at
Yavne.
Yeah.
We make our own. We should make our own, yes.
Walter's buying the booze.
With pleasure. No problem.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Shavua tov, everybody.
Everybody. Bye.
Well,